Hi, and welcome to Thinking Constellationally. I'm your host, Stephanie Sena. This is a show where we connect the dots between systems of inequity and between ourselves and our neighbors. And we're on USALA Media. Thanks for joining us today. And I have a really incredible guest in the studio. I'm so excited to speak to her today. Her name is Tailinh Agoyo, and she's the director of We Are the Seeds of Cultural Trust. And Tailinh is really someone who is doing incredible work in the community. I've been following her for a while now on social media, and as I mention often in the show, I like to take this opportunity of being the host to be the student and to have my guest be the teacher. And I'm very excited, Tailinh, to have you teaching us about your passions and about what you're doing for the community. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Oh, I'm grateful that you're here. And I also want to just apologize to any listeners. I am feeling sick this week, and so my voice is not what it usually is. And in addition to that, I apologize should I have to cough or blow my nose in the middle of the podcast. But this is life, and so we continue to go on. Tailinh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brought you to starting We Are the Seeds?
Yeah. I am an Indigenous person of Narragansett descent, and I'm also Chinese. I have lived here in Philadelphia for about 5 years, and we started We Are the Seeds of Culture Trust. We started around 4 years ago. We became a nonprofit about 3 years ago. And what we do is uplift and center Indigenous arts, Indigenous voices through the arts. So that's our mission. And we put on a very large Indigenous art show in Santa Fe, New Mexico every August. And we'll be going into our 4th year of that this August. And we work on bringing different types of educational programs, cultural programs, performances, workshops to Philadelphia.
Amazing. So you started doing this in Santa Fe, or you've been doing it in Santa Fe and Philadelphia both at the same time?
Well, my co-director, Paula Maribal, she actually lives in Santa Fe and works on We Are the Seeds in Santa Fe, and I work out of Philadelphia. We both have been working in Indigenous art organizations for many, many years. And so we had worked together at Swaya Santa Fe Indian Market, which is one of the largest Native American art shows in the world. And after we had left that organization, we moved into another organization together. And then ultimately we said, we have our own vision of how an art show should be. We want to see an Indigenous art show led by Indigenous people. And we had our own vision, so we decided to go for it ourselves. And initially, the organization was started to have the one main show in Santa Fe. And then we started branching out to do other programming in other places.
That's incredible. So you mentioned that you wanted this art show to be centered around, but also run by people of Indigenous culture.
Right.
Was that not happening prior? Were art shows led by others that were not from the Indigenous?
Generally, there are... I can't speak for all the art shows, but generally a lot of the art shows are run by non-Indigenous people or in museums and non-Indigenous organizations, and they may or may not have Indigenous people on the board or input from Native artists and Native communities. And we just wanted to have a different approach, and from what we had worked with and what we had been seeing in terms of how to share about our Indigenous culture without creating this type of commodification of Native culture, how to share who we are in an honest and way with integrity, and in a way that honors the artists and the work that they do and honors their families and their ancestors, and doesn't and treats them in a certain type of way. Okay. So there's a bit of a shift in our approach, and we tend to want to be flexible and available to what the needs are in the communities.
Okay. Incredible. So I would love if we could explore this a little bit,
sure.
because what you're talking about in terms of ways that some, certainly we're not speaking for all art shows, but some might have been conducted, is reminding me of cultural misappropriation. You use the word commodification of, I think, Indigenous art and culture. So that's something that you and I might be well versed in, that language and that understanding, but potentially some of our listeners might not be. Can you kind of tell me what that means to you, cultural misappropriation, or what can go wrong when the people who are leading these art shows or art exhibits or displays are not incorporating voices on their board, in their operations, from the cultures that they are exhibiting? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I guess I'd like to say that it's really important to make sure that in these types of art shows, or anytime Native people are represented, that Native people's voices are represented, and not just out front center, but in the production behind the scenes, because the people making the decisions really do set the tone for how we are perceived out in the world. And obviously there are a lot of misperceptions about Indigenous people, and that goes back to just, Hollywood. That goes back to, there's a lot of reasons for that, and whether intentional or not intentional. It was important for us that our artists were able to speak their truths. And so I feel like a lot of times when Native people are represented, it's like there's this preconceived notion of what they're supposed to be, or how they're supposed to act or look or dress like, or what kind of art they're supposed to present. When I was growing up, my father's an artist. When I was growing up, we lived in Rhode Island, and then my mom went back to work, and she had a job in New York City, so we moved to Brooklyn. And he would go to art shows, and I would go with him. Ever since I was like 2, I would travel with him to art shows, so I know this world very well. But he would go to art shows in New York City, and people would be like, well, why are you here? You need to go out west. Or, why you're a Native artist. Like, you don't belong here in New York City. And his work happened to be much more, it was informed by who he is, but it was also very, contemporary is not the right word, but what we might identify as contemporary, stylish, very streamlined jewelry. And so then he would go out west, and they'd be like, this isn't Native jewelry. So it was always this something like, how do you define what Native art is? How do you define who Native people are? And to Paula and I, that's not up to us as show producers to do that. It's up to us to put it together, to give you the opportunity, to give artists the opportunity to say, well, okay, this is who I am, and this is what I'm informed by. I come from this place. My family's from this place, and all of that has created who I am and what I make.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense to me, and I appreciate you clarifying that. I feel like as kind of somewhat of a definition of cultural misappropriation, what I'm talking about is generally that there are groups of people, including the Indigenous population, who have been exploited by forces of colonialism and imperialism, and they have been subjected to genocide and enslavement over the years. And what is especially nefarious about cultural misappropriation is that it's often when it's the group of people who have been part of the exploiting, or they have been historically the colonizers, are then profiting off of the art and culture of the groups who have been disenfranchised, enslaved, and killed, such as the Indigenous populations. There the two things that two other examples I was thinking of when you were speaking. There was a great episode of This American Life podcast where a woman of Jewish descent went to Krakow, Poland, to visit the community where I think her grandparents were from. And most of her ancestors had died in the Holocaust. And when she went to visit, what she found is that there was really no more Jewish population because this was a town and a part of Europe where the Jews had been killed. It had been rounded up in mass during the Holocaust and put in gas chambers. And yet, what struck her is that there's this kind of Jewish revival happening. So Jewish culture was suddenly trending in Krakow. And she would go to these bars where they were playing like klezmer music and eating, traditional Jewish foods and kind of celebrating Jewish culture. But there wasn't much of a recognition or appreciation or an understanding for what had happened to the Jewish community in Krakow. It struck her, and she felt that this was the first time that she, as an American Jew, had ever felt culturally misappropriated.
Interesting.
I'm of Jewish descent also, and so that story really struck me because I never feel that here in the United States, any kind of cultural misappropriation. But I guess going to a town or a place in Europe where all the Jews had been decimated, only to find that suddenly people were profiting, and people who potentially it was their parents or grandparents who had been part of that, and now they're profiting off of Jewish culture, was fascinating. But in terms of, you said, it's not up to you to determine what is Indigenous culture or art, and that people wanted to kind of put your father's art in a box. I find that fascinating too. And I think that, when we have this history, I think that part of colonialism is in erasing people's histories and creating new histories that are more palatable to the powerful class. And even I was reading one of my favorite authors, Alex Perry. He has a book called Rift, A New Africa Breaks Free. And he's talking about how in certain regions of Africa that you have Americans who come to go on these safari tour trips. And they want to see this Africa that fits with their, their kind of colonial, what is the word that Edward Said used, Orientalism, this image of what they want this culture to be. And so because that's profitable then, the tour guides in Africa are giving these American tourists what they want. But then they take their break and they go to the sushi store and they eat sushi, which would confuse the tourists, because that's complicated. But our lives are complicated. And I think that when you have people who are running the show and who are organizing these art shows, who are from the culture and who incorporate in the leadership positions people from the culture, I think you get more nuance, less stereotyping, and let people's voices be heard. And I think this is why, and I'll say it, but I'll repeat it as often as I can, this is why representation matters. And so I think that what you bring to this art space is incredibly vital and important, and which is why I was so excited to have you come talk to us about this. So I kind of just wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about the, because you kind of said there that had been largely missing in this space. I mean, we can't, of course, say that of all of these art shows, but you were bringing something that's incredibly significant and important.
Well, I think it's tricky because, nonprofits, in being in the nonprofit world, it's really important. You rely on your donor funding, you rely on admissions, you rely on a lot of the outside to help to make things actually happen. So you do have to, other organizations do have to give into certain things or create a certain thing that people want or are looking for in order to get those those donations and to get the visitors to show up. And luckily we're a small organization and we're not right now we're not looking to scale any bigger than this. Like, we do what we do, and we're happy with how things are, and we don't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it's very beautiful. And yes, sometimes it's a struggle financially because we're not getting maybe donor dollars that would be looking for something specific that would feed into how they view the Indigenous experience, or what they want to experience when they visit around Indigenous people. But we don't have to make those types of sacrifices right now, and I'm really proud of that.
That's incredible. And there I'm thinking about kind of when there's this power dynamic between the art subsidizers, the people who have the money and the power and the resources to sponsor the arts, and the people who are making the arts, making the art themselves. And when there's that power dynamic, the artist might feel compelled to make art that is to the taste and the interest of the one sponsoring it. There are there's so much research and literature on this with the Harlem Renaissance and Black artists who were creating art for largely white audiences who wanted their Black art to fit a certain stereotype. It's true today, I think, in the music industry. Certainly when it comes to rap, and you have the people who are controlling these music labels, who are predominantly rich, powerful white men, and they want a particular sound, music, lyric that fits with their notion of what.
Right.
Yeah. So you're always. I think that when you are. This is even true. I can even think about in the academic world and with, speakers who are some speakers in the academic world, if they're lucky enough, go on these speaking tours and are paid a ton of money to speak at conferences. But then they're also, because if that's where their resources are coming from, they have to, kind of navigate that, and their message might be different than what they know or they feel or that's in their heart or that's true, and it might be geared toward what the funders want.
It's tricky.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Tricky, and it's not always a conscious thing. Sometimes you catch yourself doing something and you're like, oh, wait a minute. No, that's not our truth, right? But luckily, we have a lot of support and a lot of supporters who really believe in what we're doing and understand our vision, and so we're really good there.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
This is, it's just so interesting to listen to you in this story and hear about, what you are offering in this art space, and to center Indigenous narratives, Indigenous art is so very important. So I'm excited to have you here. We're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back to Thinking Constellationally and talk more with our guest, Tailinh. So thank you so much, Tailinh, for being here with us. We'll be right back. Great.
I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. And even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. I have a mentor, Maria, and she convinced me to continue my education. She just never judges. She's a true role model.
From the depths of my heart, I thank you, Maria, for being a friend and a beautiful person. No one receives a diploma alone, and I'm honored to share this moment with you. Thank you.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Hi, and welcome back. We're the show Thinking Constellationally, where we connect the dots between systems of inequity and between ourselves and our neighbors. I'm your host, Stephanie Sena on USALA Media, and I have a very special guest on our show today, Tailinh Agoyo, who is the director of We Are the Seeds of Culture Trust. And we were just, before we took our break, we're talking a little bit about the significance and importance of this work that Tailinh does to center Indigenous population, Indigenous voices in the art world. And Tailinh, if we could talk a little bit more about some specific things that you do here in Philadelphia. You brought a book with you today.
I brought a book.
Can you talk a little bit about this book that you brought?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
This is Colleen Farwell. She is here. That's
you.
for you.
Thank you so much. I love books.
Colleen Farwell is actually a friend of mine. We went to college together many, many, many years ago, yes.
Where did you go to college?
Dartmouth College.
Okay.
And she wrote this poem. She has 6 children, and she wrote this poem for her kids about 20 years ago and put it away in a drawer. And we reconnected about 5 years ago, and she recited the poem to me and made me cry. And she said she always wanted to make it a book. And I said, you need to make it a book. And just one thing led to another, and she asked me to help her produce the book, help her make it happen. So 4 years later, we have a published book that's available on Amazon, and it's being distributed and it'll be in museum shops and bookstores, and it's really beautiful. So what it is, it's a story about a mother's love for her child, and it's very inclusive. And what we've done is incorporate Indigenous artists' work into the book, which is something really special and unique that we've done. So we've really taken the mission of Seeds and incorporated it into this project. There are 6 Indigenous artists. The book is illustrated by Eleanor Grosh, and she incorporated the Indigenous artists' work into the I Will Carry You world. So if you go online and you look at iwillcarryouchildrensbook.com, you'll see the illustrations, and you'll be able to see all the work of the Indigenous artists that are represented in the book, whether it's baby's blanket or mom's jewelry. It's really a really cool project. We're really excited about it.
This is beautiful, and it's relatively new. It was published in 2019.
It was published late last year,
Okay.
and
Wow.
we just it's up on Amazon now as of last month. So we're really excited, and it'll be popping up in museum shops and stuff. So it's great. It's perfect because the illustrations are gorgeous. The story is beautiful, and I keep getting comments from people like, it made us cry, and a lot of parents with adult children buy this book for their adult children. It's just a story about how, it's called I Will Carry You, and how your parent or caretaker will take care of you even when you're left, when you're gone, when you go off to live your own life. It's really beautiful.
It's gorgeous. The illustrations are so stunning.
Right?
Thank you so much for bringing this for me. I'm excited to take it and read it to my children.
Yes.
This reminds me, I had a book growing up. I think it's something called like My Baby You'll Be, and this story of kind of no matter what happens, you'll always be my baby.
Yeah.
It's kind of a universal theme.
Exactly.
But centering Indigenous culture, Indigenous drawings and illustrations.
Well, that's what we love is that you can't quite tell what mom or what baby, what culture they come from. But if you look at the book, there are certain things like babies wearing moccasins, and there's a native blanket, and mom's wearing akanav, which is a very well-known Indigenous designer. So there are little pieces and influence of Indigenous culture in this book, but it really speaks to everyone.
That's right. That's right. It's gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And again, if readers want to go and find it, you can find it on Amazon.
On Amazon or on our website, iwillcarryouchildrensbook.com.
All right, I will carry you childrensbook.com, and I'll put that up on my website
Thank
too.
you.
Absolutely.
So that's like one of the projects that I've been working on. And in Philadelphia, We Are the Seeds. We have been working, we had started out here slowly. Like I said, we work on our big art show in Santa Fe every August, where we have about 100 Indigenous artists, and it's a 2-day festival, music. We have rock and roll and hip hop and classical and all kinds of Indigenous performers. And
are
it's
you basically running the show?
Fabulous. Paula and I
Oh, my
run the show.
goodness.
We work to get all the artists. We curate who's there, and
I imagine that takes about a year.
it
to
takes
plan.
a whole year. Definitely, it definitely does. But we've been doing this so long, not just with We Are the Seed, but in our other positions, that we can do it pretty well. And it's nice because we know so many people just from doing this at our other jobs, and also just growing up in this art world, being connected to the art community and the Native art community has been really helpful in just gathering things together. And I think a lot of artists and performers can see our vision. And when we decided to create We Are the Seeds, people really jumped on board and said, how can we support? How can we help you? We want to be a part of this because we love the idea. And really the idea is that it's not just an art show where people show and sell their work, which is number one priority for Indigenous artists to be able to make a living and go home and buy school supplies and all those things, very important, and to keep creating. But also we want to create a space that's safe, that collaboration can happen, that Indigenous artists can enjoy each other, that they can enjoy the space. And what we thought about, like, how do we feel about this show? How do we feel about We Are the Seeds? We want it to be a space where it's a celebration of who we are as Indigenous people today. We want it to be a celebration of us. It's for us. And visitors can come. Everyone come and join us in the celebration, but we're creating it for us to have the best 2 days ever. And then we open it up. And so I always try to keep that in mind when we add programs or when we go down certain paths and say, okay, does this benefit us? Does this make us feel good? Does it lift us? Does it help create opportunities in the future? How does it affect our Indigenous artists? And that's how we go forward. So we do that every year in Santa Fe.
Do you hear a lot of feedback from the people who participate in it?
It's so much fun. We just have a blast. It's just the energy is great. We're we're walking around and we're dancing. People are in their booths dancing. It's a big party, and it just feels really, really good. And people show up. We get the visitors to come through and they enjoy the art and they buy the art, and that's so. To me, it just feels like. And we're growing, so it feels like it's super successful.
It's amazing. Well, you're going to grow by one more. I think I'm going to come in August. You've
in
inspired
August, please
me.
come.
Yeah.
It's going to be fabulous.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah, we're really excited for this year. We have a lot of changes. Like I said, we just go with the flow. We say, this is working, this isn't working. We just shift. And because we're small, we can do that. We don't have to wait 5 years to make a little change. So this year, we're making some changes we're very excited about. But we created... we did our first We Are the Seeds Philly last year at Taller Puerto Riqueño. And I knew it was going to be an investment and it was going to be one of those experimental things because Philadelphia is a completely different place. So Santa Fe is very immersed in the arts, particularly Native arts. People go to Santa Fe, like I said before. Like people would come from New York and New Jersey to buy art from my father in Santa Fe. Like that. Santa Fe is an art town. And there are a lot of Native people visible in Santa Fe, whereas here in Philly, we kind of we're not as visible, or we don't meet the perception of what people think Native people are. So I knew building this in Philly would be very different, and I would have to adapt it because of how we're perceived here, how, obviously there's been a lot of erasure, and we're basically invisible. So I knew my approach had to be very different. So what I did was create a one-day event, and it was about 5 hours. And Paula came out from Santa Fe, which was fantastic, and she brought Indigenous foods from her community. That was amazing. And we decided on a day full of programs. So we We partnered with Cinespeak, who created a film program for us, and then we had Chin come and perform and tell traditional stories. Avery Amaya did a workshop on lacrosse, which is a traditional Native game. And so all day we had entertainment and dances and education, and I expected people to come and go, but basically people came and like stayed for all the programming, and they were so interested in it. It was so telling. And I asked 5 artists to come and show their work, and I knew it wasn't going to be like Santa Fe, and I knew, because I think we're at the point where we need to build the education and build, share how Native art is valuable. I don't think we're not there yet. So it was really having them there to participate and join in, but not really. I knew that the sales were not going to be to the same level as Santa Fe. So I knew it would be different, but it was very successful. We had a lot of people come through. We got great press in the city and a lot of attention, and it really helped to establish us so that it gave us an opportunity to show what we really do. I think before that I was sharing images from Santa Fe and video from Santa Fe, but once we were in Philly, I'm like, we did this here in Philly, and then it kind of took off from there.
So you did the one in Philadelphia?
We did that last April.
Okay.
And then...
Are you doing another one?
Well, we partnered to produce Indigenous Peoples Day at Penn Treaty Park in October. Amazing. So we worked on that event. And then this year I decided not to produce another one because it was really producing from the ground up, where I had to rent the venue and raise grant money and do all those types of things. And this year we have had so many partnership opportunities. And toward last fall, we partnered with PAFA. We're partnering with the Free Library to work on their. They're doing One Book, One Philadelphia with They're There by Tommy Orange. So we're producing the finale event with them.
That's huge.
Huge, yeah, and it's very exciting. It's going to be fabulous. It really.
When is that?
It's March 18th at 7:30 at the Free Library.
I'll put information about that on my site too.
Yeah, it's going to be a great evening. We've invited several performers from the Philly area or South Jersey area to perform and show their artwork, and then we're going to have a panel discussion about referencing different themes in the book, focused on what it's like to be an Indigenous person living in or around an urban area.
Amazing. So is there going to be a cooking demonstration? I know that they have a kitchen.
They have one coming up. They have about 100 programs going on it started January 22nd through the end of March.
For They're There.
Amazing. So on their website, they have all the programs, and they're wonderful. I've been to about 3 myself so far. There's so many more coming up. I want to get to all of them, but they're all over the city, and it's just been a fantastic experience working with them. So to answer your question, I felt like putting my energies and my work into these partnerships was important. And we may have another We Are the Seeds next year here, but this year it just seemed like the way the calendar went, we have so many other programs going on. I'm working with Haverford College for the Philadelphia Area Creative Collaborative project, and partnering with them, we're creating about 9 events from now through April. Wow. So there's a lot going on.
It sounds like you're busy.
Yeah, very busy.
That's incredible. And as you mentioned, so important, I think, for Philadelphia because we didn't. This is a space that we didn't have these things years ago.
Right.
So there's a need for it here in Philadelphia. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned. Lacrosse. So when you were mentioning lacrosse, you said at the last event that you had, the big event last year, that you had people coming out and kind of sharing that or doing demonstrations. my son had to do a report on the Kiowa tribe, and we went to Penn Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, and there were a bunch of artifacts on display, and one of them was a lacrosse stick, and he didn't know that lacrosse was an indigenous part of indigenous culture, indigenous history, an indigenous invention, and it was interesting to me. Because I think often the way that museums and history books teach about Native culture and history, it's almost as if it's taught as if it's a dead history, as opposed to a living, breathing culture and history that is ongoing and adaptable and changing over time. And I think that that's vital. There was one artifact behind a case. And it was a baby carrier. And
I saw that.
And my son took a picture, and he was like, "Look at this baby carrier." And there's a little plaque next to the window, next to the case, explaining that in indigenous culture, women often carried their babies when they were working in the fields. And it was so fascinating. And I said to Jonah, "You know what? That's a baby Bjorn." I had the same thing, and I belonged to a farm share, and I would go every Friday to the farm and pick fruits and vegetables, and my children were babies, and I would wear my daughter Sylvia in the sling. And I said, it's not very different than how we live today. I think, though, when we put it in a glass case and call it an artifact, and the way that we talk about it and treat it, I think we have this notion that this is something so different from the way that we live and so divorced from our reality today. And it's cute. It's cute and it's old and it's and it's entertainment, but not relevant for how we live our lives today. As opposed to understanding that really so much of our practice and our life today and our world today comes from indigenous populations, comes from indigenous inventions and indigenous art and culture. And I think that the way we teach about it doesn't recognize that or doesn't share that. And so I think that bothered me. But then also I think that while so much of how I raised my children is, based in indigenous culture and indigenous teachings, I think that there's so much that we still need to be taught from indigenous culture, indigenous population. There's a gorgeous book that I highly recommend, and I've been shipping it to all of my friends, called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robyn Timmmer. And it's really, I think, about the teachings of plants and what we learn from indigenous culture and indigenous populations about how to live in harmony with nature and the environment, and how to really be grateful for what we have. And it reminded me that there is so much that we still have left to learn from this population, as opposed to the way we learn about it, which is this is a cute, nice little culture that,
it's done. And
it's done and it's over. And it's sad that people died, but that was then, and we are now more advanced. And I would argue that we are not more advanced.
We are not.
And reading that book reminded me that we have a long way to go before we can consider ourselves to be advanced. And I think that part of that, we would do ourselves a great service if we listened more to indigenous culture and teachings.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our special guest, Tailinh Agoyo, to talk more about her project of We Are the Seed. So we'll be right back. Thank you.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Thanks, and welcome back to Thinking Constellationally. I'm your host, Stephanie Sena. On this show, we connect the dots between systems of inequity and between ourselves and our neighbors. I'm on USALA Media with our special guest, Tailinh Agoyo, who's talking to us about her work with We Are the Seeds. And so before we took our break, we were talking a little bit about how we treat Indigenous populations and culture in history, history books, museums, and certainly I think you and I have seen this in how our children have been taught in school. So you were just saying...
Yeah, I had an experience, well, I have 4 children, but now my youngest is in 3rd grade, and we had an experience where he, well, there were a couple of things I saw in the school. They did a whole exhibit of where natives lived, and it's just a simple shift in language. It always seems like it's always past tense, and luckily I brought it up to the school, and we've had several meetings, and they've been very, very receptive. But there was something else where they worked on drawing. They had these cutouts of Lenape people, and then they were to dress the Lenape. And I asked my son, I said, well, what are you going to dress your Lenape drawing as? And he said, well, he's going to wear brown pants and a Nike jacket. And I was like, that's exactly it, right? And I thought, that's so interesting, though, that the teacher says, dress them as Lenape. So then immediately everyone kind of goes to, okay, what are they going to wear? Are they wearing breechcloths? Are they wearing buckskin? What are they wearing? Instead of thinking, my son knows Lenape people today and what they wear, and this is what they wear. So it was, it's just a really small shift, but it makes a huge difference. And so when we did go in and talk with the teacher and the school, they were really receptive, and I was so happy about that because, and I saw following that the language had changed. And so if it was, and the curriculum does cover the past, and that's part of our history, in grade school, that's part of the curriculum. You have to talk about the history. But to specify, don't say, well, we're talking about Lenape, and then everyone just automatically assumes it's from the past. Say pre-colonization, pre-genocide, although they wouldn't say that in 3rd grade, but you know what I mean? Like, let's be real about the timing of it, because we don't do that with any other culture. When we specify the timeline, or we assume it's in the present. And with Native people, we don't assume it's in the present, and we need to make that shift. And that's part of why We Are the Seeds is here in Philadelphia, to bring programs to schools and to museums, organizations like the library, to share who we are today. And one of the things that I found was really interesting, we did a program at Meredith when my father did a storytelling 2 assemblies there. And then we went over to the Friends School, Friends Select, and he was supposed to speak in a history class and perform. And I believe they were 9th graders, and it was a small, maybe class of like 20 kids. And so he's like, all right, I'm here. You may never, ever get to ask a Native American any question you want. Ask me anything you want. And the conversation turned into like, what are you most afraid of? Where did you work when you were younger? And it was the most beautiful hour, and it was the most unexpected thing. The students wanted to hear about his life. He's an elder Native person, and they were drawing comparisons to his life, and they just wanted to hear about who he was. And it kind of sparked something in me, and I want to develop a program like that where it's just like, we don't need to come in and perform for you or show you, that's special and it's important to us, but that's not all of who we are. And that was so profound to me, that interaction. And the students led the conversation, and he was receptive to it, so it was beautiful. And I thought, okay, there's definitely a need for that. And so I'm developing something. We'll see how it goes.
That's incredible.
I just thought it was the best day. And since then, we've done a lot of other programs and panels and discussions about land and water and traditional performances and what we do, because we have such a rich culture. But I think that it's so important for people to see the realness of who we are in the everyday, how we are so much a part of this American society, how we contribute to the economy, how we contribute to the brilliant things that go on in the world. There's so much of that for Seeds, I feel like we need to make sure is front and center.
That's incredible. Amazing. I'm so inspired by you, and I'm grateful that you're bringing this to our city. I'm so happy that you're here and that We Are the Seeds are here. So tell me about how we can get involved. I know, as I said, like I'm ready to book my trip out to Santa Fe for August.
You have to come to Santa Fe, because it's a blast.
I will, but tell me how others can be involved. What activities do you have coming up? What workshops? What can we do if we want to volunteer? Are there volunteer opportunities available? Tell me what.
Definitely, there are volunteer opportunities in Santa Fe for August. Right now, they come and go for Philly. So reach out if you want to volunteer, and I'll see if there's a good fit for that. Our website is wearetheseeds.org, and all of our information is on there, whether you're in the Southwest or here in Philadelphia, and we're on all the social media, so we can be contacted that way. And I post our programs on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and basically some programs are planned and some are just pop up, and they happen from week to week. So if you follow us, you'll be able to keep track of what we're doing. And I think the best way to support us is to come out to events and tell people what we're doing. And if you're in a space where you think that Indigenous voices are lacking, speak up and let everybody know, because it's one of those things where people forget. It's not on their radar, and I'm here to make sure it's on people's radar that Indigenous people need to be in the room and need to have a voice. And just because we're not necessarily visible to you day to day doesn't mean we're not here. We're here. And it's really important for us to be represented.
100%. Amazing. Tell me, where do you see yourself and We Are the Seeds in 5 or 10 years? What is your hope? Do you see yourself at all expanding outside of Philadelphia and Santa Fe, or tell me what are your long-term goals for We Are the Seeds?
That was always the hope, and it was to bring We Are the Seeds to different regions, thinking about the Northwest Coast or Chicago, but right now, that may happen. I'm in a place where I feel really good about the progression of Seeds. And for the first 3 years, as you know, it's just, you're just off and running, and you're working, and your head's down, and you're just working. And I'm finally, I have my head up a little bit, and I'm enjoying the programs that I'm helping to develop, and enjoying the process more. So I'm really not in a rush to the opportunities are coming, but I'm actually at the point where I'm saying, well, this isn't the right timing for that right now, because I want, first and foremost, to enjoy my family and to enjoy my kids they're growing and they're not going to be here for long, so that's the most important thing. But in terms of the work, I think that we're in a good space, and it'll be an organic growth, and it has to be something that is comfortable and just natural and beautiful. And I'm not in a place where I want to be stressed about work anymore, because if I'm not healthy, nothing is healthy, right? So I'm much better at creating these kind of boundaries for myself and figuring out, like, does this help the organization move forward, and does this help me keep a healthy balance in family? And so I'm okay with it right now. I'm very happy.
It's incredible. You're doing so much incredible work, but what's also very obvious is that you are experiencing a lot of joy from this work.
Yes.
And so I think that you're really fortunate, because there's a lot of people, you have a gift, and everybody has a gift, I think, but a lot of people, first of all, some people don't know what their gifts are or how to utilize them. And you have found a way to really utilize and pass on your gift. And it creates so much value for our culture, for our society, for our city. And it also, I can tell, creates value for you.
Yes.
So that's really a blessing, I think. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have gotten the opportunity to learn from you and to hear about what you do and the incredible spaces that you bring into our city, the incredible workshops and programs that you create. You are an artist, and your medium or your landscape is really our minds and imaginations. And I think that by centering Indigenous culture, Indigenous history and population, and making sure that these voices are heard and represented, I think is so incredibly vital. And I'm just really excited that I get to live in the city with you, that I count you as my neighbor, and and that my children can benefit from this knowledge and education that you're passing on throughout the city. I would love if we could partner together with Meredith, my kids' school, to have more programming there. But I think that this is something that schools throughout the city should be
Definitely
getting involved with.
Yes. Yes, we would love that.
That's incredible. So I'll just remind our listeners that there's a few different things that they can do to get involved. First of all, check out the book. The book is incredible. I Will Carry You. And so you said there's a website, iwillcarryyou.com.
It's iwillcarryyouchildrensbook.com.
Okay, I Will Carry You Children's Book, and I'll put that up on my site also. And check out We Are the Seeds, where if you go to your social media pages, your Facebook page, or I guess Instagram also.
Instagram is wearetheseeds_art.
Okay, and you have a full list of upcoming programs. And do you have any needs right now as a nonprofit for either web design or help with, grants, or I guess all of our organizations could use more resources.
Yes. Well, I'm starting to look for a new computer, so if anybody has access to that. Yeah, mine is on its last legs.
Okay.
It's worked as hard as I have all these years. Now it's very tired.
But we need to get Tailin a new computer. Okay. That's a great ask. I think that's important, and we need to make sure that you have a computer.
Yeah.
So you can continue to do this important work.
It just seems like it seems like it should be the priority, but all of the resources always go back into the artists or the programs and everything else. It's like, that doesn't make much sense. I know, but that's what happens. That's just like when you raise your kids, right?
Yep.
The kids get everything, and then mom comes last.
I can completely relate to all of this.
It's all right. That's how it is.
I can completely relate to all of this, including the fact that my computer is also on its last leg, as am I, quite literally. So.
I know. I talk to it, and I'm just like, hang in there.
Just
I know how you feel.
A little bit.
Just let's get through this grant.
Right? Oh my gosh, Tailin, I'm doing the same exact thing at home.
Do not break on me now.
Oh, I can completely relate. And on Mondays, I feel like if I give it a little weekend or a break, it's it's harder sometimes to
It
start
does.
it on
It
Monday.
is.
And I'm
If
like,
you give it a break, it's harder.
yeah, I'm just
is
like,
hilarious.
I know, I'm like, I know it's Monday and you don't want to be here as much as I know, but just come on, we can
push
do it. You need
through.
some
We
coffee.
can do it. Just push through.
Oh my gosh, amazing. So there's a variety of ways that listeners can get involved, but certainly I think that you and I would encourage people to just show up, to come to these events,
please show
participate.
up. It's a lot of fun and a lot of learning.
Especially this, I think what's that, the Free Library of Philadelphia is, and programming for One Book Philadelphia. They're there. Remind me the date again.
March 18th at 7:30, and it's free.
Okay, so I'm absolutely going to be there.
It's going to be great.
I can afford free, and I want to bring my children. And I have the book; it's on my list, but I'll make sure I read it before that date.
Yeah.
Incredible. And then again, I would recommend everybody check out Braiding Sweetgrass by Robyn Timmmer. Incredible. Well, Tailinh, this has been really special. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Me. I really appreciate it.
I've learned so much from you, and I'm very inspired by you. Thank you for connecting the dots between ourselves and our neighbors. And that was our talk today on Thinking Constellationally. We'll be back next week, but everybody enjoy your week. Thank you so much. Bye. Tailinh.